Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for Mind Check. My name is Virginia Cumberbatch. I serve as co-founder of Rosa Rebellion, which is a platform for creative activism by and for women of color. And I am so honored and blessed that we collaborated with the Austin Justice Coalition and Minds Over Melanin to create the Mind Check series. And really this was birthed out of a conversation and a concern that we had that in this unprecedented moment around COVID-19 and the ways in which it was disproportionately impacting the Black community, that we wanted to create a space where we could connect, commune, but more importantly, raise the visibility and provide tools around how important our mental wellness is. And as many of us have experienced over these past few weeks, the continuous sort of turmoil and trauma of seeing Black lives brutalized and viralized, we can not think of a more needed space than figuring out ways that we can support one another and making sure that we are both mentally taken care of, but also spiritually and physically. And so we're so grateful that you guys would join us this evening with everything that's going on to hopefully have a chance to exhale, have a chance to rest, have a chance to reconnect with yourself and with others, and that just for an hour, we can have a little bit of reprieve. And so tonight we're going to be talking about how to process the overwhelming amount of negative information that we are constantly being inundated with. I know for many of us, social media is a tool, but can also be a source of drain, a source of sort of as a trigger or trauma. And so as we navigate, this moment and this exhaustion that comes with constantly seeing the ways in which our lives are not valued as Black people, as people of color, we invite you guys, no matter what part of the journey you're on in terms of this work around sort of racial equity and justice, to learn how we can process this negative and traumatic information. And so we're really excited and grateful to have two incredible practitioners here with us tonight. My role is really just going to be to facilitate their incredible voices and energy and expertise, and we hope that you'll glean something from it. So before we get started, just a few pieces of information to help frame how tonight's conversation is going to go. We're actually going to open up with an exercise to help us all just be a little bit more grounded and have a chance again to kind of exhale after, I'm sure, a stressful day. And then we're going to enter a dialogue that I'll facilitate with our two speakers this evening for about 20-25 minutes. And they're going to be offering us tools and information about how we navigate, overwhelming information. Then we'll open it up to you guys. So we encourage you at any point during the evening, if a question pops up or you're seeking a piece of information or a resource, please feel free to put it in the Facebook live chat or the YouTube live chat. And we've got team members working behind the scenes that will share those questions with us. But just so you know, we'll be answering those questions specifically between around 6:40 and 6:50. So feel free to send them at any point, but we'll specifically touch base with you guys around 6:40. So before we get started and I introduce our wonderful speakers, I'm actually going to turn it over to Paige Willis, who I'll introduce a little bit more formally, to open us up in a sort of grounding mindfulness exercise. And so Paige, thank you so much for leading us.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so no matter where you are, just figure out if you'd like to sit or lay down. And then just start to shake out some things, maybe roll your neck from side to side, maybe wiggle your fingers, wiggle your toes, get comfortable in your space. And then as you're starting to feel yourself loosen up a little bit, just really get grounded in your space. So if you're seated, then root your sit bones down into your chair, into your couch, whatever it is. And if you're laying down, then let your body just feel heavy against the earth. Take a deep breath in through your nose, really feel yourself fill up. And then on your exhale, blow out a candle. So we'll do that 2 more times all together. So take a deep breath in through your nose, really fill up and expand. And on your exhale. Now this last time, take a deep breath in and just notice the temperature of your breath as it comes through your nose. And then on your breath out, put some bass in it. So give it a And then from here, take your breath on your own. Maybe even close your eyes if you're comfortable. And you can also look down at the ground if you'd like to keep your eyes open part way. Over these next few moments, just challenge yourself to concentrate on your breath, seeing if you can get them equal in length, a little bit longer than normal. This is your time to check in. We all are coming from different headspaces. We all have different emotions. We might have some synergies here and there, but right now, our focus is all to get on the same page, to all be present in this moment and taking control over our thoughts, over our bodies. So as you continue to breathe, just ask yourself what it would look like to press pause on everything else that's going on and focus on everything that's going on inside this virtual space. So what's going on inside of your body, what's going on inside of your mind, and then how the conversation unfolds in this community. Focus on those things throughout this time. Your choice in being here is super powerful, and your choice in processing what's going on right now is a step in the right direction. So feel affirmed, but then also know that you have the permission in this moment to not have it all together. So with that piece of comfort, we'll take 3 more rounds of breath as a community all together. Breathing in deeply through the nose, just noticing if there's been any shift in your body since we first started. And breathe out. 2 more times, take a deep breath in, feel your lungs fill up and expand. And let it all hang out on your exhale. Last one, make it count. Take a deep breath in through your nose. Then on your exhale, slowly open your eyes and get ready for what's next.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paige. Like, I already feel lighter and just being prepared to facilitate this conversation. So I hope all of you guys feel the same way. So thank you again for joining us this evening. We hope really that you take this opportunity to just breathe, exhale, and hopefully gain some tools and some insight. And if nothing else, to feel affirmed that you're not the only one feeling the way that you're feeling in this moment. So I'm super excited to introduce our speakers. First, you just heard from Paige Williams. Paige is originally from St. Louis. She's Chicago-based now. She's a yoga instructor and lover of storytelling, curating playlists and playing violin. Very talented, multidimensional. Through Black Girl in Om, which you guys do not know about this organization. They're incredible. We had the pleasure and opportunity of having Lauren Ash help us launch Rosa Rebellion a few years ago at South by Southwest. And they've just been such a supportive space. And her role through Black Girl in Om is to be able to commune with and be empowered by other women of color. Paige's intention is that of an instructor to help cultivate creativity, connection, and celebration of self with others. And so again, information about Black Girl in Om, you can go to their website, but specifically a space curated to empower Black women and give them a space to feel liberated, empowered, and seen. And then we have Dr. Marlene Williams, who I've been given permission to just call Marlene today, but I want y'all to know that she's got that PhD. Marlene is a therapist, educator, and researcher from Houston, Texas. She's currently an assistant professor in the counseling psychology program at Texas Women's University, working towards her license in Texas. Marlene received her doctorate in counseling psychology from the University of Texas, Knoxville. She has a passion and she's committed to social justice advocacy and identity-based equity. During her training She specifically focused on the idea of clinical experience around cultural trauma informed by mental health care in various settings, including inpatient rehabilitation center for substance addiction, as well as various university counseling centers. But I think what's really powerful, particularly in this moment, is that she's utilized a feminist multicultural approach that is intersectional in nature, with an emphasis on how multiple marginalized identities intersect with multiple systems of oppression. And I know that is such a lived experience for so many of us. And so we're going to be exploring that today or this evening about how our identities are being contested in this moment, but we all know for generations. So I was really going to kind of start this conversation off by talking about, I think, some of the tension we might feel in this moment, right? This idea that we're exhausted and we're overwhelmed by having to endure something that neither of our parents, our grandparents have experienced, a pandemic, right? But we're having to endure that while also grappling with the pre-existing inequities and oppressions of living specifically in America, but we know for Black people and people of color all over the world. And I think sometimes that tension is around, we should have the right to rest and find joy and find reprieve, but it also feels like in this moment, we need to be in a position of resistance and agitation. And so knowing that the impetus of this series was around particularly COVID, and us realizing as scholars and storytellers and mental health professionals that Black people were enduring the brunt of that. But as we see sort of the data, one of the things we've recognized is that this is not just having an impact on how we navigate our daily life, but our mental health, our physical health, all those things are connected. So Marlene, I wanted to sort of ask you, for some of us, the idea of racialized trauma is a very new concept. We've never been given the language around it. And in some ways, we have been told that it doesn't exist. Day after day, we're told that it doesn't exist. But we know that it's a real thing and it has real consequences. So I wondered if you could explain to us exactly what racial trauma is, confirm for us that it's real, and let us know how that differs from other traumas.
Absolutely. And this is a really, really good question that I'm glad we're talking about, because you're right. There's been some, even within the mental health community profession, we are late in recognizing this as a real thing that does exist and does happen. And it's also important, I think, that us as a community, that we recognize and have understanding for what we are actually experiencing right now. And we are experiencing racial trauma. That's what's happening right now. So racial trauma is, to put it plainly, it's our reactions to different types of racist discrimination, right? And those events can be things that are typically humiliating, shameful, cause some form of a threat of harm or injury. But the interesting thing with this is that it does not have to be witnessed or experienced directly. It can also be experienced vicariously through witnessing it happen to other people as well, right? And racial trauma is actually linked to generations of the racial trauma that our ancestors experienced as well, right? There's a prominent trauma therapist, Dr. Resmaa Menakem, who's written a whole book on this, who talks about how that racialized trauma is carried in our physical bodies, and it's actually passed down in our DNA. So whether or not we are consciously aware of it or experiencing it ourselves, we are reacting to it, and we can react to it in physical ways and also in emotional ways. And so that is why, with all of the negative messages happening, you turn your phone on and you're scrolling, and these horrific, traumatic images and videos are coming up. This is why you're feeling that reaction, right? Even though you may not have been there in person, you're watching it happen just as if you were there, right? And it's something that's directly impacting your community and people of your race. And so I think it's important that we understand that, right? That this racial trauma is a thing. It's connected to generations of trauma, and it's going to be a really, really important aspect of our own self-care, self-preservation, to work on that healing process so that we can move forward.
Thank you. I think even giving us context that even the practice of psychology is behind in naming this means that means the support around giving us as people experiencing it, we've lacked the language and in some ways the agency. Megan Harding, my co-founder, we always talk about the example of Erica Gardner, who was 29, and after a couple of years of being on the front lines in an effort to seek justice for her father, Eric Gardner's death, died of a heart attack. And you can't tell us that there's no correlation between those two. That mental piece creates exhaustion in the physical piece.
Absolutely. Can I add one more thing?
Yes, please.
That I forgot to say, because I also do want to make it clear, I'm glad that you asked, what's different about racial trauma and other forms of trauma, right? It is similar to things like PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder in that it affects you physically, emotionally, and it also is coupled with this intense fear and avoidance, right? So for example, if someone has PTSD from a traumatic car accident, one of their main symptoms of PTSD is going to be an avoidance of ever getting back into a car, right? Because that would put them back at risk. What's different about racialized trauma is that because racism is so much a part of a lot of our daily lives out in public, it's much more difficult to avoid those situations. So we are on a regular basis re-experiencing and being re-traumatized, right? So that's also just an important note. And that happening over and over and over becomes chronic. And that's where we see things like what you're talking about, where it's not just affecting your mental health, but also your physical health, right? So I just wanted to point that out. That's important to know.
No, thank you for creating that clarification. And I think this connects really well when we're talking about this connection of mind, body, right, and spirit. So, when we think about the continued death and murders of unarmed Black people, but also this particular piece that our generation is being confronted with, which is the recording of it, which is obviously, in some ways we can argue a tool, right, for seeking justice, but it also is creating this incredible sense of exhaustion, right, where in some ways this viralization of our bodies being brutalized has become normalized, right? But we realize that there's nothing normal about seeing people that look like you, die. And so, Paige, I was wondering if you could talk to us about your opinion around how do we create boundaries that help us not be triggered, or in some ways, I think just as detrimental, become numb to this, right? I know there's so many people I've seen in the past few weeks that will be posting on Instagram, like, please stop posting these videos. Please stop posting these photos. We don't need a reminder, right? We don't need another death to be the reminder that we need to see systemic change. So how do we create those boundaries in a way that also doesn't opt us out of the conversation?
Yeah, I think the first place to start is designing your days and being strategic about the way you're doing that. So in that, you have to prioritize your rest and then figure out where everything else is going to fall after that. I think when we go on the plane, they always say to put your oxygen mask on first and then take care of everybody else. And it's the same thing here. It's like your resistance is going to flow out of the quality of your rest. So if you're not resting well, then your resistance is going to be like hella chaotic and just like very reactive versus mindful, meaningful, and responsive. And so everyone's rest looks a little bit different. So I think that like the first step as you're prioritizing what that is, you kind of have to define it for yourself. And the way that I think that, like, especially at Black Girl Unknown, like we are all about intention. And I think when you come at rest with the proper mindset of like, your resting is an act of political warfare. Shout out to Audre Lorde for that. But amazing thinker. But it's just like, there's so much truth in that where we forget that self-care and wellness are actual things and they're not buzzwords. And when we start treating them like they can add to our rest, then we start resting in a way that builds a sense of mental resilience so that when we do have to fight, we can do it and we're strong enough to do it. And we've been fighting for a very long time as it is. So the odds are that we have not rested nearly enough in order to actually make an impact. So I think just scheduling it for yourself and defining what it looks like for yourself. And so knowing that it could be like homegirl's face mask, and that's fine if that makes you feel rested. But then it can also be like FaceTiming your mom, talking to a friend, going for a hike, going on a picnic, running, yoga, any of the things, like, especially if it has movement involved, that's where you can start to release some of those things. While we were shaking out things before, we hold a lot of tension in our neck, in our shoulders, our hips, hands, feet. So if you can move your body, you're already starting to release, you're already starting to rest without even having to like think about it too much. And then the mindfulness piece of it comes a little bit later, and you have to have attached some intention onto it. But as long as you're just being really mindful about how you're going about your days and finding the harmony between the two, because you're not going to find this like exact balance of rest and resistance. Some weeks you're going to be a hot mess because there's going to be things that come to light that are going to stress you out, and you're going to have to realize like, I'm tweaking a little bit. I need to step aside and call my mama, talk to my friend, do whatever you need to do in order to kind of fill your cup up, so that when you approach that situation again, you're like, okay, I can choose whether I want to deal with this right now. And you're a little bit more mindful about how you're reacting or responding to things.
I love that. First of all, I'm already writing this down as a potential, quote pull out, but I love this. You said, don't worry, we'll cite you. But I love this idea. You said our resistance quality is gonna be based on the quality of our rest. And I think that's such a powerful sort of reframing, right? Because oftentimes it's like we go till we literally can't go anymore. And then that's the trigger for rest, right? But like what happens if we shift that mentality and we say, no, one of the forms of resistance is the preservation of Black people in this country, right? That's one of the biggest forms of resistance, and that we should have the ability to value ourselves enough to rest. And not, like you said, not the idea of going to a spa, right? Although that is lovely, but real rest. What does that look like? And that is actually a tool to our resistance rather than an outcome. I love that. And I hope you both will kind of contribute to this question, and I'll pose it to you first, Marlene, and then Paige, for you to jump in. But yeah, as we talk about the value of rest, the value of checking in with ourselves, again, I think there's this pressure, right? That like the mic is hot right now, so we can't let up the gas, right? We were jumping on the Zoom call, all of us kind of talking about our individual efforts, and all of a sudden people recognize that we've been doing this work, and now they want to support. So our Instagrams are blowing up, right? And people are getting emails, and people are engaged at another level than what we've seen before. And I think even for those of us who don't consider ourselves, quote, organizers or activists, but all of us just living our daily lives as people of color, as Black people who have to take on this work, it feels like this is the time. And so we can't let up, we can't rest. What would your recommendation be for how we not just create space for both, but how we unplug without becoming disengaged, right? And I think for a lot of us, the trigger is social media, right? But it's also such a powerful tool. And so what would y'all's response be to that?
Yeah, I'll say I have felt the guilt this entire time as well. So none of us are exempt from that, especially as you noted, Virginia, that we're seeing it all everywhere, all on social media. We're inundated with the live updates of the protests and the news and what else is happening. And this person said this. And so even if you aren't physically there at the protest, or even though you don't physically have the mic, you're still feeling that, right? You're still feeling that, and that can fuel this this feeling like I have to do something. I have to overwork until until exhaustion, right? So that's why one of the number one things that I've been reminding myself and other people around me is it is okay. Can I tell you it's okay if you are not physically there at a protest, you're not physically there on a microphone or having a grassroots organizational meeting. It is okay, especially for two reasons. One, your protest and activism can look different in so many different ways, right? And secondly, the rest part is also very, very, very important, so that we have the endurance and the energy to continue this for the long haul, right? So there's a few things that I want to kind of mention here. One thing that I think happens because of social media's role in all of this, right, is again this pressure that we've got to say something too. We've got to post something. We've got to share this. We've got to do this. I think that is great. We do need that. We need that virtual support and somewhat of an outlet to a larger community. On the flip side of that, I think what we have been doing is we've been missing a major step in the healing process and even just in the resting process. And that is, we are immediately going to the social media to share how we're feeling or our thoughts before actually feeling them, sitting with them, experiencing what they're like, checking in with ourselves. And so the main thing is to that I recommend people do is don't let Instagram or Facebook be your only or your first emotional outlet, right? Sit with some things with yourself, with others around you that you can talk to more personally, because it can allow you to really connect with that, to sift through and reflect on how you're feeling before going online and being inundated with everything else, right? The other thing that I've been reminding people to do is to please don't feel like you have to resume as normal, right? That is the hardest thing. I know for me personally, after any of these things come through in the news and I'm hearing of another Black person killed, to then go to work the next day and say, oh, I'm good, how are you doing? I cannot. I have decided that I'm not going to fake that funk anymore. And so if in any way possible, I realize people's work schedules and things are different, but in whatever way possible, see if there are ways that you can shift things around in your schedule. Take a morning walk before you get into work. Take extra time during your lunch, something to that effect, so that you are actually being intentional about taking that time to reflect and to feel, to check in with yourself. Continue doing the deep breathing that Paige helped us with, leaning on support, activating whatever self-care things that are good for you. Again, one thing that I have been doing that has been helpful in balancing this is when I go on social media sometimes and there's this petition or there's this organization I want to read more into or whatever, I've started scheduling out some of those things. I might screenshot it or I might save it so that then when I am feeling like I have that energy a little later in the day or whatever, I can go back to that, right? And sign the petitions or donate money that I want to give. Just don't feel like you have to do that continuously all day long, because it's going to build up and build up and build up until you're out of energy for anything else. So those are just some things. I don't know if
that's a lot of things. This is one of those moments when you realize you wish you weren't the moderator, so you could really be the one to soak up all of this information. I love the encouragement to not let social media be your first outlet. Because I do sometimes use sort of Instagram as sort of my live journal, right? Yeah. Or my public journal almost in a way. And I do think there's something really powerful about how I processed it for myself before I feel the pressure to say something. That's exactly what I broke my ankle a few weeks ago. So I missed 2 of the rallies. I was covering from surgery. And there was this deep feeling, obviously being physically trapped, but not being able to participate in a level that I normally would. and separating that is not the only response or outlet for this moment or any moment. Paige, I'm going to shift a little bit to ask you a more direct question. As we think about, I think this is one of the most beautiful pieces that's come out of Black Girl and is that y'all have created an accessible space, right? It's not just culturally accessible, which is what I, as a Black woman, so appreciate, because you weren't seeing us in yoga studios, you weren't seeing it being culturally offered, right? But also kind of in this American space where we love to create luxury around everything, right? So it's like, in order to, have this moment of, self-reflection or this moment of self-care, you must fly all the way here, or you must spend $400 on a spa package. And we all know that that's not true. There are these really practical things that we can do day in, day out. So I was wondering if you could offer some resources or practices that help us not just process the information that Marlene just spoke of, but just protect our peace. That's a term that Megan and I have adopted over the past few years that were offered to us by some of our other friends who work in the mental health space. And how do we protect our peace? And particularly in the moment of COVID, where we can't be as physically active or we can't commune in the way that we might typically do that.
Yeah, that is loaded. Keep me accountable in answering all of it. But I think the first part of everything, and y'all gonna hear me say this word a lot just because we do it so much with Black Girl and Home, and that's really the heart behind everything, but it's intention and knowing why. Like, if you're thinking about unplugging, or like if you want to protect your peace, like think about what you're feeling. Notice when your triggers are coming and when you're feeling yourself getting set off, and then take a step back and be like, okay, like I clearly need to go elsewhere and take care of myself. And so when it comes to like figuring out what taking care of yourself means, the first thing that comes to my mind is go offline. There are a lot of beautiful things on the internet, but there's also a lot of trash on the internet. So like the way that you can kind of like protect yourself is to go offline first. And that doesn't necessarily mean go outside, because like, yes, we are in the middle of a pandemic. So like each your own risk. But think about the things that make you happy. Like I hesitate to give like very prescriptive things that you can do, just because we're all so different. And I may say like making playlists makes me happy, and I can make one playlist for 5 hours and be like, everything is right with the world, and just feel good. And that may feel like, why would you do that for you? So it's just thinking about like, okay, when I'm at my happiest, when I feel the most full, when I feel the most grateful, what are the things that I'm doing? It could be cooking a meal for yourself. It could be, like I said before, like talking to someone that you love. It could be a trick that we talk about often at Black Girl and Home is like, if you know your love language, and you know that like mine is quality time and physical touch. So I may just like be in the crib talking to myself, and that makes me feel good. Or I may lather myself with my lotion a little bit longer. I don't know. It's just like those little things, like get yourself a gift or like write yourself a note. The most useful thing that even I don't like doing that much, but I know that every time I've done it, it's been beneficial. And it's a core piece of pretty much all of our events at Black Girl and Home is journaling. And I know that like term can make people feel like, okay, here she go. But it's kind of like, you don't even have to write it down if you don't want to. A lot of times I type things in my notes app on my phone, or I'll just like sit and play some instrumental. I'm real emo sometimes, y'all. So like everything I'm saying is like, I sit with candles burning and instrumentals playing, but that works for me. But if you are more of like, you want to go for a walk and think about it as you listen to like some of your favorite songs or whatever, it could look different for you. But think about some questions. And I can give y'all some before we leave today, but think about some questions that challenge you to dig a little bit deeper, because again, it's just like the quality of the rest that you have. So if you're not digging deep, if you're only operating at a surface level, your impact is going to be surface level. If you take it a little bit deeper, if you know like what your triggers are, for me, Instagram is a trigger, and seeing people's Instagram stories triggers me. And I even feel like some type of way if I see like all the things I'm supposed to do. So I have screenshotted, and that has been like helpful, of just like, I don't have to do this right now, but there's gonna be a time where I wish I had this information. So let me go ahead and put it in the archive. But knowing yourself, knowing your triggers, knowing like, does your soul feel tired? Do you feel like you're irritable? Do you feel like somebody says one thing and you snap? Like, those are things to pay attention to. And if you feel like you're numb, if you hear about another death and you're like, okay, well, here we go again. Noticing those feelings and then matching that same energy with your rest. So that doesn't mean like go on Netflix and watch Netflix for 5 hours. It more so means like do something that's actually going to fill your soul and make you feel fed a little bit, versus just trying to put a quick Band-Aid on it. But then you also have to like be disciplined about that rest. Like, you can't just do it one time. It's coming at it each day, each week. What is it going to look like for me this week? One week, I might feel like going for a walk. Another week, I might not. It might be illegal to go outside, or I might just not feel like going outside anymore. And that's okay. It ebbs and flows. And just honoring that and the way that you treat yourself to rest is super important. Did I answer the whole question? I feel like
I think you answered all of it.
Okay.
And one of the things I picked up that I'll just sort of reiterate to folks. One thing, I think it's really affirming to just be in a space where you realize, oh, okay, because I think it can be seen as a weakness. Like, oh, well, why can't I endure all this information, right? Or isn't this the work I'm supposed to be doing? And I'll say, just even for myself, like, I literally run a space, a social justice center, right, at a university. I'm doing work, through Rosa Rebellion. So it feels like we should be, equipped to do this, but it's just really not human nature to be able to be inundated with so much information at large, or like in general, but specifically such traumatic information. So giving ourselves permission, I think, is really key. And it's just even great to hear y'all talk about screenshotting things. I do that all the time. I say today I literally cannot fathom the idea of getting on Instagram. But I know this is important. I know it'll support my vantage point, but it'll also support my work. And when I feel ready to do it, I will do that. And I think it's because rest, in some ways, particularly in communities of color, where mental health resources have been inaccessible, there's been sort of a faux pas around the idea of even seeking out that this is something that we have to learn. It's not something that is innate to us. And so I think even giving ourselves patience and learning what rest looks like for us, learning that we can experience joy in the midst of this pain, I think is really important. So I appreciate how y'all both have kind of given us that freedom tonight. Before we turn it over to questions from those of you who are joining us on Facebook or YouTube, and I know we already have a few questions, but this would be a great time, if you have some more, to go ahead and put them in the YouTube chat or the Facebook chat, and we'll get those sent over to us. But I want to wrap up our dialogue with one particular question, and then just anything else that either of you would want to add. But knowing that trauma is not just psychological, or the effects of it are not just psychological, they also show up physically. So some of us who may not have the terminology or even the understanding of what that might look like in our mind, are there ways that you can give us some some guidelines on how to identify stress and trauma and how to alleviate it in the moment, whether that's mentally, emotionally, or physically? And so, Marlene, we can start with you, and then have Paige end us.
Absolutely. One of the most foundational things that we'll do in therapy, and that you can do in your own home, you can literally Google these things. It's called a body scan. And there are actual recorded meditations that you can find too. That's one of the easiest things, because you can do that at any time, anywhere. And it's literally you just checking in, making intentional effort and time to check in with your body, to check in to see where are you holding stress, where are you tensing up. Like Paige said earlier, we tend to hold it in our shoulders. For women, we tend to hold a lot of stress in our hips. So you might find that throughout the day, you're just really scrunched up. You need to intentionally take time to release that. Every time you feel that, to release, and then scan your thoughts as well. What's coming up for you in your thoughts? Write it down if you need to. See how those are connecting as well. That's just one of the easier kind of ways to do that throughout the day. Another thing is definitely utilize therapy services that an individual in therapy or a professional can help guide you along with that on a deeper level.
Yeah, exactly. I wish I could just be like retweet, but I can expand on it from like a yoga teacher perspective. But yeah, like I said before, it's hands, feet, neck, shoulders, hips. Those are the money spots where if we're going through something or feeling some type of way, that's typically where we might feel a little bit of tension. And by tension, it's just like, is it uncomfortable? Like right now, my hips are uncomfortable because I have not gotten up and like walked around enough today. And you can come at it proactively, and like I mentioned before, like scheduling your rest, that can mean you like get up every hour and maybe like walk around the crib, I don't know, do a squat or two, maybe go outside for a little walk at lunchtime in the middle of the day, get your vitamin D in, which we also don't have as Black people. But just like finding practical ways to incorporate that movement. But it's beautiful that you said body scan, because that's exactly what I was about to take y'all through. So gang, gang, we'll do it in a second. But I think I'm not sure what everyone's relationship with meditation is. And I know that it can kind of be like some people feel some type of way, some people love it. So maybe if it's more helpful, just think of it as like times in your day where you can just take like a quick 30-second pause. You honestly don't need more. If you want more than that, love to see it. But if you are kind of like struggling with like paying attention or being in the moment, try 30 seconds and just like sit still. And literally, we'll do it in a second, but go up from your toes all the way to the crown of your head and just think like, okay, dang, my knees hurt. Hips are a little uncomfortable too. And just noticing those things. And then, I mean, you might not have like yoga at your disposal, or you might not even like it, but finding movement, like your body knows what to do. You just have been like suppressing it for so long. So like if your knees are uncomfortable, what do you automatically do? Go put your hands on your knees, start massaging them. Maybe you get up and walk because you know that you feel that pain. So it's all about having that awareness and just training your mind to be like, okay, I feel a little clammy in my hands. I'm just going to start wiggling my hands as I'm in this meeting. And if you're on Zoom and you don't want to be like this on camera, then maybe you're doing it, wiggling your toes, wiggling your fingers. Very simple, subtle movements, and just see how those subtle things impact your day. But on top of that, like I'm always going to say movement, and just figure out what type of movement looks for you. Because I mean, as humans, we're built to move. Like that's part of the reason why we're mobile. So if you want to, that could be walking, that could be running, that could be hiking, that could be cooking is movement, yard work is movement, whatever you feel like you need to do to kind of just like get out of your head and into your body, then do that.
Thank you so much. And I will also just share, particularly because of COVID, there are so many mindfulness resources and even free yoga online on YouTube. So if it's something new to you, we would encourage you guys to just sort of pop on. And also we'll be sharing information about the Circle, which I know Black Girl Mom is doing. I know they are full right now, but I think they're all going to be reopening it. So Paige, before we end, I'll have you share a little bit more about that. We do have some questions from folks from YouTube and Facebook. Just to be mindful of time and make sure that Paige has enough time for our ending exercise, I'm going to direct these to each of you, and then just kind of maybe a fire round response. I'm going to direct this one to Marlene. Have Black psychologists considered writing a DSM specifically for Black people?
Ooh, interesting question. So no, not to my knowledge, we have not. However, what has happened though is that over the years, so we do have a diagnostic statistical manual, they call it, of what we use to diagnose mental health disorders. But what's happened is every few years a new iteration comes out, and Black psychologists have been a part of that movement of increasing the amount of attention that's given to cultural aspects or characteristics, things that contribute to one's symptoms or they're experiencing a disorder. So we do have that. And then there is like a kind of an association of Black psychologists who do get together and help disseminate that information, whether it be through research, webinars, or on college campuses to the public as well. But yeah, there's not necessarily just something for us, but we rather are advocating for more inclusion of us in the manual that is used for everybody.
Awesome, thank you. Our second question was around, I'm going to direct this to you, Paige. For people who don't feel like they have community outside of social media to properly vent or discuss with, what would you recommend?
I think that depends on where you're located. I would start with doing like research on organizations in your area. Black Girl in Om has the benefit of being, we were originated in Chicago, but now we're in multiple different cities. So I think I'm a firm believer of like, you don't have to meet everyone that's going to be in your life at one specific time. I've met one person and that led me to Black Girl in Om, and Black Girl in Om has led me here and to other places where I've met a whole bunch of other people. So like, you just need that one organization, that one person to kind of like unleash a sense of community. But I would start with, the cliche answer of family, but everyone's relationship with family is really different. So my first answer would be to research what's in your area. And if it's Black focused, that's obviously preferable just because we need more spaces like that. And I think you do have the advantage of there's a lot of free things happening right now. And the circle that we just mentioned earlier, it was a live experience, but now we'll be able to play it back. So there's things like that where you can have that sense of community. And as you start to figure out where people are from, that's a lot of the things that I've been learning through being a part of the circle with Black Girl in Om, is that I've met people from all over the country. And then from that, they connect me to other people. So there's a lot of richness in that. So just do some research and figure out what's in your area. And then when things open up again, hopefully we can actually meet in real life.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's so important, particularly, right now where, some of us, our only connection in terms of community can feel like it's on the internet. I'll answer this one because it's Austin specific, although I know.
Virginia,
yes.
I'm so sorry. Can I add to that? It's really, really important. I think we should also really consider therapy at this time, always, but especially now. And a really cool thing about the social media stuff is that it has increased our access to mental health services that are they're run by Black therapists and Black psychologists. So there are different directories right now that are actually offering free therapy to Black people in the US. There's the Boris L. Henson Foundation.org. That's Taraji P. Henson's organization. So go there and see how you can find out how you can get access to free mental health care. The LoveLandFoundation.org also is offering that. And you can check Therapy for Black Girls has a really large directory for psychologists across the nation, men and women. And then psychologytoday.com also has a directory where you can type in who you want to see, where, and what types of things you'd like to work on. Again, some of these are free, some of them are not, but you can always ask for a sliding fee scale. Some people don't know that. You can ask psychologists or therapists if they're willing to reduce their rate based on your income or what you can pay. Those services are available to you. I just couldn't let this pass up without me saying that, because therapy is going to be crucial and very, very important for us right now and as we move forward.
No, please don't apologize. And that was actually the next question. So you perfectly, You could feel it, I could tell, right?
Yeah.
No, and the question was actually though specifically for people, therapists or counselors that were people of color in Austin. So the only thing I would add, because those were all national platforms, which please, we will get that information from Marlene and put it in on our website at Rosa Rebellion, and we'll share it with Austin Justice Coalition, as well as Minds Over Melanin, to make sure y'all get access to that. But in terms of people here in Austin, unfortunately, it's not a robust list in Austin, so we would encourage you to tap into some of the national conversations, but also considering the pandemic, a lot of folks aren't meeting in person. So the idea of having a counseling session via Zoom is not, something far-fetched. But we do have a few practitioners here in Austin that Rosa Rebellion has worked with and we're very trusted. One is Danielle Locklear, who actually focuses on racial trauma. There's also Jennifer Cumberbatch, who happens to be my mother, both Black women. And then Davia Roberts, who used to be in Austin, but is now based in DC, but she does do virtual sessions as well. So for the Austin people, those are some resources, but please take the wisdom that Marlene just shared to heart as well. So we have one more question before we sort of wrap up with a intention exercise. And this one is, are there any books, podcasts, or YouTube channels that you would recommend? And my assumption is that align with some of the things and principles that you guys shared with us. Maybe it's yoga, the practice of yoga, maybe it's mindfulness, maybe it's, conversations with therapists and counselors, anything that you guys can share, and we'll be sure to document it so folks can connect to it later.
Yeah, I actually have a book that I was hoping I'd be able to tell y'all about. It's called The Racial Healing Handbook. Okay, it's got activities, it's got opportunities for you to reflect on it. The current president of basically the governing body of all psychologists in America, she wrote it. And so it is focused on allowing you time to reflect on your racial socialization, on your experiences of racism. It's both can be for non-Black and Black individuals, and it's supposed to help your healing process. So I think that's good. It's about $20 on Amazon. I also, a podcast is by Dr. Kimberly Crenshaw. She's also a Black woman psychologist. She has a podcast called Intersectionality Matters, and you can always count on her to center the voices of Black women amongst all this everything that's going on. And then I also really recommend looking into books by other Black feminist authors and scholars. One in particular is Bell Hooks. I'm currently reading her book, All About Love. And so that is also one way that I'm balancing all of the negativity and stress, is also reading about love from a Black woman who knows it so well. So those are just some of my recommendations you can try.
Yeah, and I'll just shimmy on top of that by adding the Black Girl Known podcast, obviously. That on a personal level, that's really helped me develop some of the language to talk about any traumas that I've experienced, or just my wellness journey in general. So there's a lot of intel on healing, and we have, if you go on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts, perhaps Spotify, you'll be able to see descriptions and the guest speakers that we've pulled in, who a lot of the speakers that we've had have their own books. So that's a great place to start. I think on top of that, we'll also have we already talked about the circle, but we'll also have some free programming coming on our Instagram. So if you just follow us on Instagram, we will have some meditation, some guided journaling, some yoga classes. So that'll be free for y'all in the future. And then I think that's about it. I would only add Audre Lorde, who was the Black thinker that came with the idea of caring for yourself is political warfare. So if you want to expand on that, and if that the relationship between like your resistance and your rest and the quality of both of those things, if that's intriguing, then I would definitely look into her and start to pick her brain through her books.
Awesome. I'll just add a few that are already on our website at Rosa Rebellion, but Headspace is also offering free sessions, but also the Loveland Foundation, which was started by Rachel Cargill, who's a really wonderful voice, not just in this moment, but over the past few years, around intersectionality and sort of what Black women particularly can be doing to support themselves and creating community as they resist. So I wanted to invite Paige to kind of close us out in a way that allows us to create intention for the rest of our evening, create intention around all this wonderful information we just absorbed, so that we are truly learning how to rest as we resist. And I would encourage you guys, so that's the last thing we do. I'm just gonna quickly remind you guys how you can connect with us moving forward, so that you're in the know. We hopefully will have continued mind check sessions throughout the summer. So some of that information is you can follow Rosa Rebellion at Rosa Rebellion, both on Instagram and Twitter. My personal Instagram and Twitter is at VA Cumberbatch. This is also in the YouTube information and on Facebook. You can follow Dr. Marlene Williams at marlene.williamsphd. And you can find Paige at Paige Willis, Willis. And you can find Black Girl in Om at Black Girl in Om on Instagram and Twitter. And then please follow the Austin Justice Coalition on Instagram and Twitter, as well as Minds Over Melanin. And that information is now, you should be seeing on your screen. We'll be posting updates about the Mind Check series, but also the individual work and programming that we each do within our organization. We also should be posting a link in the YouTube and Facebook chat. It's a link to a survey. This is really just so that we can have information and feedback from you guys about if this series is useful, if it's a resource, how we might shift it or expand it, or if there are particular voices out in the world that you would love to hear from in this context. We'd be more than happy to consider them, to invite them into this space. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I'm going to turn it over to Paige. Hopefully you will stay for that. And then we're just going to stay on for a few minutes to allow us to end with an amazing song that is from our Spotify playlist. You can find it at #MindCheck2020. It's a curated playlist with songs contributed from all of our speakers over the past month. So Paige, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, this time around, if you can sit with your feet planted on the ground, that is ideal. Take a deep breath in through your nose, really fill up and sit tall, hands on your thighs. And then on your breath out, roll your shoulders down your back, maybe even gaze down at the floor or just close your eyes fully. We won't take too much time here. We'll just start to scan our bodies from the tips of our toes to the crown of our head. So first off, just notice the texture of the floor beneath your feet. Start to wiggle your toes. Acknowledge any embodied stress or tension that may be living there. And just take note as you shift your awareness up your shins, your knees, your thighs and hips, just noting how everything feels. Could you use some movement in your spine? Maybe you start to wiggle side to side or front to back. Just notice what's happening, almost like you're taking inventory. And then as you're traveling up your spine, maybe roll out your neck. Switching directions if you've chosen to do so, but continuing to just breathe. And find stillness for these last couple of moments. If you notice any tension in your shoulders, lift them up towards your ears and then lower them down and back. And if your tongue is hanging out at the roof of your mouth, just let it relax. We'll take 3 rounds of breath in through your nose, out through your mouth on your own. And then I'll give you some questions to just consider as you go on about your evening. So question number 1, how can you invite more harmony between your resistance and rest? Knowing that the quality of that rest is going to directly impact the quality of your resistance. And then question number 2 is just how can you complement that rest with meaningful resistance? In other words, what does resistance look like for you? It's not going to be the same as it is for your cousin, your mom, your friend, whoever. It's going to be unique to you. So think about the gifts that you have, the talents that you have, and how you can use that to carve out your own space in this movement, knowing that it's going to be an endurance fight. It's not going to be something that we can solve tomorrow. So how can you make it meaningful? Take a deep breath in through your nose, fill up. Last breath out. And we're done. Oh, you're on mute.
Did it only once this whole time, so I'm pretty proud of myself still. I just want to thank Paige so much. I want to thank Marlene. Thank y'all for extending your energy and your time, which isn't necessarily restful, to encourage us in our own rest and resistance. We're so grateful for y'all's voices, not just tonight, but out in the world. And I hope everyone will connect with these incredible young ladies. We're gonna go out by playing just a little bit of music. So you're welcome to stay online. Otherwise, you can find our playlist at #MindCheck2020 on Spotify. You guys have an amazing week. We hope that you are encouraged to find joy and rest even in the midst of our resistance.
Drink it away. I tried to put one in the air. I tried to dance it away. I tried to change it with my hair. Out of my credit card to love. Thought a new dress would make it better. I tried to work it away.